Hello, good evening, and welcome to the TNT Show. My name is John Drummond, and I'm your host for the next 60 minutes. And we've got a really exciting guest on tonight. We'll be talking to Jason Baird about the Indy App and much else besides. But I thought it would just be worth just taking a few seconds of your time to talk about the crazy things that are happening. You may recall that Labour were recently elected with a landslide majority based on the quirks of first past the post. And one of the outcomes has been that they've been asked to effectively fulfill their election promises. And one of those, made by a number of Scottish Labour MPs, was that they would get rid of the two-child ban. There was a chance for them to do that last night in Westminster, and every single Scottish Labour MP voted against the amendment put forward by Stephen Flynn, formerly of this parish, because you may recall we did a show with Stephen a couple of months ago, and they were threatened with the removal of the whip, and they decided that they would rather be whipped than be ethical. Their choice. They'll have to defend that choice, of course, at the next election, if Labour is able to sustain itself sufficiently long in the future. I suspect that they're going to fail early, and it's hard to see that will be otherwise, because it seems to me, and there may be others who will join me in this, that there's no deep or sustained moral centre, core to the present Labour Party. There used to be in Labour parties of yore, particularly the ones that were elected at the very first time and right after the Second World War. These people had a deep commitment to ethics and morals, and it led to the NHS, which was highly commendable. This lot, I suspect, will preside over the privatisation of the NHS, because as far as they're concerned, it's merely a way of repaying the folks, I suspect, who have bankrolled their election campaign. And as you know, the piper always calls the tune. So here we are, after another great day for British democracy. We are happily able to bring some light into the darkness that is now the administration in the UK. And that light tonight is provided by Jason Baird of the part of the National Yes Registry, who has put together with colleagues and supporters the Indy App. So without further ado, let's speak with Jason and get all the details about the Indy App. Hi, Jason. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Thank you for asking. Tell us about the Indy App, Jason. How did it come about? What was your role in it? And how do you see its future?
Well, the Indy App was an idea that came about in 2014 during the independence referendum. It goes back that far. And really what it was just the frustration. I worked in a yes shop in Largs, and with a lot of other colleagues, and we found that the practical problems that were occurring trying to run that shop and trying to run that local campaign, we came up against all these practical problems, and those problems were about collecting let me rephrase this, is that it was communications essentially. We found it very difficult to communicate with other yes groups that were in the area, other yes groups around the country, because we would require, being in Largs, we had a lot of festivals and lots of public people coming on holiday to Largs, down the water. Mm-hmm. And so it was a massive campaign, a kind of a holiday campaign we had, of holidaymakers. And so we needed like things like wristbands and all of that kind of gear, balloons, wristbands, all that kind of stuff. And getting access to them was really, really difficult. And so one of the things that we did was we got in contact, we tried to get in contact with other groups who possibly had that gear available and would allow us to share it and use it.
Yeah.
And so that was one of the things that the app was originally designed as, is to try to find and have easy contact with other local groups. And that was just a practical thing in Largs. But another thing that happened is that we had a Yes group, a Yes shop in Largs very early on. And so lots of folk came on holiday to Largs and they saw the Yes shop. So we had people from Aberdeen coming to Largs on holiday, seeing the Yes shop, coming in and going, oh, it's a Yes shop, great. And so we were the first point of contact with the Yes movement that these people from Aberdeen had, because there wasn't any Yes shops in Aberdeen. So they came to Largs and had made contact. So the idea of the app was to have kind of an online shop that anybody could download the app and find where their local shop was and contact them and, find them. So that was another idea of the app. So sharing resources was one, finding the group to join and to get involved in, and also just basic communication between the people who got involved. So instead of having an enormous email list, you had a private message system that you could contact anybody who joined your group. So that was the basis of the app. That's how it started. It was designed as a communications tool, really, for the movement that was in 2014. You know what I mean? And that movement has slowly, obviously, over the years, it's slowly changed, and the circumstances have changed. And so, but it's taken us this time to build the app, and over the last 2 years, 3 years, we've been meeting with, the app has been completed, but the movement has changed. So we've been meeting with local group members from all around the country, have been meeting regularly with us on the app. We used to call them the user group, but now they're called the editor group. And these are just normal members of groups that meet with us every Thursday for the last couple of years, and been discussing the new circumstances that the movement is find itself, and how the app can be used and modified slightly and finessed to adapt to the circumstances that we're in now. And not the circumstance for 2014. So that's what the app's there to do.
Excellent. Now, would you like to answer a question?
Certainly.
Rose Bowie is asking, can I register? I was born in Stirling, now I'm south of the border, been looking for independence since I was 12 years old, and now I'm over 80. So here's a lady who needs your help.
Yeah. Well, is it Rose?
Rose it is. Yeah.
Rose. Yes, Rose, you can register. However, you can register, but use a postcode of an area in Scotland that you would be willing to campaign in, or that you feel affiliated to, that you have contacts with, because when you register on the app, these are some of the changes that have happened from the discussions with the user group and the group members. When you register with the app, you put in your postcode, your name, your postcode, and you sign a declaration that you support independence, a personal declaration. I support independence for Scotland. And once you do that, and you register and you log in, you get your supporter number. So the app gives every person that registers a unique supporter number. And it's the way that we start counting the support for independence. So that's part of what the app is there to do. It's there to count the popular support for independence.
Now, help Rosie out. If Rose
downloads the app, goes to indyapp.scot and goes to the Get Counted button, pushes that, and downloads the app onto her device, which is either Android or iOS. And you register yourself and you put in the postcode of where you're from and register, that you'll be counted.
But it could be any postcode in Scotland, is that right?
It could be any postcode in Scotland, but
yeah.
what you would want to do is put in a postcode that you're affiliated to. You know,
Okay.
because the reason that we ask for your postcode and we ask for this is because the app shows you the groups that are around you in that postcode that you could then join. And
even if, sorry to interrupt, so even if Rose couldn't be physically at that destination, that place,
yeah,
you could still provide moral support to the
exactly.
groups there.
Exactly. Or she could join a group, and she could be managing group membership for that group because it's online.
Okay.
So, you know, there's lots that people can do if they're not even if they're not physically there, or maybe they're housebound. They're in the local area, but they're housebound. Any of that. There's lots of capabilities.
This is a good example, it seems to me, Jason, of how flexible the app could be, in the sense that there might be thousands and thousands of expatriate Scots.
Absolutely.
Who might be independent supporters, maybe based in Canada, the US, Brazil, Portugal, Spain, whatever, who want to get involved but can't physically be there.
Yeah. Well, funnily enough, I mean, we've had this discussion at previous gatherings. This has been discussed. It's a next step ahead. It can be done very easily. We haven't done it just now because we want to concentrate on organising really within Scotland and within the UK. But we have got the capability to have groups set up in every capital city around the world.
Great.
And that way, you would show the Scottish diaspora, and you would also show the international support for Scottish independence. But the first principle of what we're doing just now is organising on the ground in Scotland, and then expanding out from that. And I think if you do get organised, start getting properly organised in Scotland, then it will encourage the diaspora to be involved.
Yes, that's true.
And the capability is there. It's just a case of step by step by step.
I understand.
Yeah.
Well, the only downside that I can see about the process you just described is that when and if you get the expatriate facility up and running, you then have to unscramble people from where they said they were located in order to give them a new location.
Well, no, it's not that. That isn't a big problem, because the app is designed that people can be in multiple groups.
Good.
Because when you download the app and you join the app, you're joining as an individual. And just like the Yes Movement, this has all been designed as the Yes Movement operated in 2014. And that is, we joined as a group, as an individual. I'm interested in Yes Largs. I may go on holiday to Skye every year, and I should be in Yes Skye because I spend 3 months of the year in Skye. So I would want to be part of Yes Skye. Or I could be a lawyer, Lawyers for Independence. I'm in Largs, but I want to be a member of Lawyers for Independence as well. Sure. So I could be a member of 3 different groups quite easily. And so that's the way it would work. I would maybe be in Lisbon in my Yes group in Lisbon, but that's why I'm saying to Rose that she should go to somewhere where she is affiliated to and she has connections with, because I would be in Largs and I would be in Lisbon. That's the way I would.
I'm not sure this would help at all, but if there was a specific location, i.e. an imaginary location, call it KY13 0 LL, let's say. I hope that's not a real postcode, but it's very close to the one I used to have. But if that was a catch-all for everybody right now who is registering from outside, it might make your life a lot easier when you come to sort of unpick all that and assign people.
Honestly, there is no requirement to unpick anything, because it's the person that defines where they are. The other reason that we ask for the postcode is because the structure of the app is that you've got local groups. This is the way it worked in 2014. You have your local groups, and when you join the Indy App, you get given you get your unique supporter number of the Yes movement, and that's just for people who want to display their support for independence, but aren't wanting to get active. They don't want to get active, and that's active is normal. Inactive is normal.
Absolutely.
But if they do then go and join a group, a local group, they change from being a supporter number to a member, and you become an active member of the Yes movement that way.
Cool.
And when you join a local group, even if that local group isn't very active, you also automatically join your local your support area, which is a region.
Okay. Cool.
And that puts everybody together.
When we talked about the expat community, just one last question before we leave it. When do you think that facility might become available on the app?
I think that can become available as soon as we have, as it stands at the moment, the app has a map of all the groups that have registered on the app in the past over the last 10 years. Every group that is registered on the app is on the Indy map. And it's on a thing called the Yes directory. It's a section of the app called the Yes directory. And what we need to do now is to create that Yes directory so that every single group that is on that map has a member of that group that will answer the contact button to that.
Okay.
So that if anybody downloads the app and makes contact with a group on the map, there's somebody there to answer them by private message.
For the sake of discussion, if I were to go on and register a Yes group for expats, then I could become the contact for that group.
You could, yes.
Excellent. Way to go. Okay. I'll maybe do that tomorrow then. Once I've paid all the bills. No, that's a great idea. And I commend you for it. And I commend all the others too. In very general terms, and we can come back to the app in a second if you like. What's your impression when you look at the political scene right now? What does it make you feel?
Well, this is part of, a large part of what is being discussed every Thursday with the group members that come to talk about, how the app is positioned in the current environment. So that is essentially what you're talking about, is the political environment that the Yes movement finds itself in at the moment and how it interacts with it. So I think one of the main issues that's happening is that party politics is, at the moment, the movement seems to me, this is just an impression that I get, I don't know what other people think out there, but the people that I speak to in the movement, we are fatigued, to put it mildly, and we're quite depressed and split. And to me, that's to do with party politics having a much heavier influence in the movement than it's ever had. And the direction that the movement is in is facing party politics. And this feeling of fatigue and upset and depression is happening at a time when support for independence in the Scottish population is higher than it's ever been in my lifetime. It's we can argue about the point, is it 53%, is it 49%? It's up and down depending on the publicity that's happening at the time and all that. But essentially it's constantly, I would think we're already pro-Indy, considering the negativity that the press is continually pushing and the fact that the SNP have had a hard election and all the rest of it. I still think that we are already in the majority view for independence in the population. And yet the movement feels flat. And the reason for that is because politics is flat, party politics is flat, but grassroots politics should be, overwhelmed with the support that is happening in the country, and that's the discussions that we are having, on a Thursday, is why is this happening, and how can we undo that feeling, and it's a kind of a reframing that has to be done.
Yeah.
So, I mean, one of the ways that we've been talking about it is that in 2014, to be a member of the Yes movement meant that you wanted to vote yes. That's what it meant. It meant you wanted to vote yes. It didn't mean that you were active. It didn't mean that you didn't even have to wear a wristband and go into work and talk to anybody. You just had to want independence, and that's what we kind of felt. Well, that's you're a yeser, and that's what makes the movement. And the activists, people like me, you, that were in the shops, they were the local leadership of the Yes movement. They weren't the movement; they were the local leadership. And so, what happened in 2014, just after the no vote, when the political parties closed down Yes HQ, is that anybody who wanted to continue the fight and make it clear to the world that Scotland wanted independence and still wants independence and we're not going anywhere, had to make the decision, what am I going to do? Am I going to carry on? And if I'm going to carry on, what am I going to do? I'll join a political party. That's what everybody did. So you ended up with like 140,000 people joining the SNP. You ended up with 30,000, however many joining the Greens, however many joining SSP. All of this movement, and it was counted. And that's when, at that moment, when the non-party political Yes movement moved into becoming party political, the leadership, the activists became party political. And the press and the newspapers started talking about the movement as like 130,000 people that joined the SNP. It gave it a kind of a number, when in fact the movement was 45% of the population. It was millions. And we somehow, over time, that has got worse and worse, because in actual fact, what we consider the movement now is the activists. That small group of people that were the local leadership have now been transformed into being the movement, and on top of them, there's now organisations that are the leadership of the movement. Other organisations have formed that are consider themselves and are considered the leadership of the movement. So this whole process has kind of shrunk again the mass membership concept of the movement. It's simply, I want to vote yes. That's what makes me a yeser. That's what the movement is. It's half the population of Scotland.
So how do you see? What do you see? Let's assume for a second, because it's a reasonable assumption, I think. Let's assume that the polls are showing that, say, 55 or 60% of Scots would vote yes.
Yeah.
How do they do that?
Well, again, for me, that's like so way ahead. The process of how you would achieve that is like, that's a First Minister's job, or that's a cabinet minister's job. That's a political party's job in power to work out an effective route there. We have lots and lots of organisations, lots and lots of clever people in the movement and outside and in party politics who are thinking about this stuff all the time. But my argument on this is that we're a grassroots, and we're not the First Minister of Scotland. The grassroots is full of people who seem to want to be the First Minister of Scotland, but not people who want to get something, make that first step at grassroots level that we can achieve. And so I would argue that the question that you asked me is too far ahead. The answers are there. There's lots of answers there, but it's too far ahead. And what we have to concentrate on right now is somehow collecting together that 53% or that 50+% that already is pro-Indy. We aren't even talking about convincing no voters or soft no's, we're just talking about finding, registering and networking the people who already want independence for Scotland. They already want it. In fact, if I go to a person who wants independence and they don't share the same kind of vision of the Scotland that I want, and I am trying to convince them about my vision, I'll put them off. It's a very, very soft touch that we need to collect that amount of people together. And the one thing that we can collect them together on is simple. Do you want independence for Scotland? If you do, register, get your number, be counted, and let's show this in a completely non-party political way that we can come together. I mean, at the moment, you have SNP supporters and Alba supporters who find it very difficult to sit in the same room with each other sometimes. And you've got Greens who find it difficult to sit in the room with either of them. And you've now got 40% of the Labour, at the last count, 40% of the Labour voters are pro-Indy. So that's a large section of Scottish population who are Labour supporters that have to be added to that basket, and in a way that can be held together and can be counted together and not knock lumps out of each other. And so that's what we are proposing, is simply a count. No policies, no party politics. You can have your party politics, of course, everybody can choose, but I don't want to be going out to find somebody to get, let's say, a Labour voter registered for an independence count and be saying to them, now, you were awful raw, you should have voted SNP, or you should have voted Green, or you're an idiot voting Labour, because they're not idiots. They've chosen to do this, and it's their choice to do it, and we're in a democracy, and we will be living in a democracy after independence. So it's this ability to separate out independent support from party politics, because at the moment party politics is dividing and hiding the majority support for independence every single election. It's just, that's the way it's happening. And the real problem that Scotland's got is that it's the democratic deficit of having half the country wanting independence and having absolutely no effect in the democratic procedure. Even when we do put 56 out of 59 to Westminster, now is not the time, and that's it. So party politics, I don't think, is going to deliver this alone. It needs to have a mass membership behind it that it can refer to as the democratic deficit that is occurring. When the SNP talk about Scottish independence, they're actually speaking for 40% of the Labour Party vote that the Labour Party won't touch. And so they need to be able to access that through something like a mass membership count.
Okay, fair point. Quick question. Is it possible for non-IT users, particularly elderly folks perhaps, to register their support in a meaningful way?
Yes. But the way, if an elderly person doesn't have a phone or doesn't, all they have to do is find their son, their daughter, their granddaughter, a friend, and they can use the app of another person on the phone. They just register. They put in their name, their email, and they register, and that gives them the count. Okay, they won't be able to use the app to join a group, but they can use the app. Their friend can help them find a local group and contact them, and they can do it. The app is simply a communication tool.
Right.
It's designed for local activity. It's designed for face-to-face. For when it comes to campaigning, right. It's designed for face-to-face activity, like the local Yes Shop.
Yeah.
It's not really, it's not all online. Let's put it, that way. It's a way to count people easily. But once those people want to get involved in campaigning, it's about putting them in contact with people in the ground to help them, to help them get involved, to introduce them to, what it means to be in a grassroots campaign, which people don't know how to campaign. Lots and lots of people have never taken part. And lots of people have taken part in political campaigns, and that's entirely different from grassroots campaigning of the Yes movement.
It's interesting you say that, because I used to live in Largs, by the way. I used to live in Bankhouse Crescent.
Oh, when was that? During the...
It wasn't yesterday, that's for sure.
Right.
And I ended up going to the States thereafter, but
a lot.
But it was. I loved my time in Largs.
Oh, it's fantastic. It's
My,
fantastic.
my wife taught at school, and my son went to school in Largs as well, and really enjoyed it. So
it's fantastic. I mean, I came to Largs because my mum and dad retired in Largs. So that I came during the referendum to see them, because I was going up to Aberdeen to campaign, because I've got lots of campaigning friends in Aberdeen. And when we came to Largs, my mum says to me, there's a Yes shop there, and it's never open. So that's why I went there, and I just ended up staying in Largs, and I've stayed in Largs ever since. It's just so beautiful.
It is lovely. Tell me, is the Largs and Millport Weekly News still running?
Oh yeah, of course it is. Yeah.
I used to be the constituency chairman in North Ayrshire in Bute for my sins many years ago. Wow. And I was also chairman of the Largs branch at one time. And I remember once chatting to the editor, because I was always very sensitive about the coverage that the SNP got, or more commonly didn't get.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
At that time, would you believe it, the constituency had a Tory MP.
Still does.
It still does it? Okay. That's very sad to hear. But he was a buffoon.
MSP, yeah.
He was a buffoon. And I used to cross swords with him occasionally, and the editor used to encourage it because it sold newspapers. And one time I said to him, I'm doing such a great job for you. Tell me if any of the times you've never done a good job. And he said, oh yeah, I can tell you right away, the biggest mistake I ever made in my career. I said, oh, do tell. What was it? He said, well, it's this. I said, was it a political story? No. I said, was it to do with some terrible fatality and you missed it? No. You were late for a deadline? No. I said, what happened then? He says, well, I got pelters for this. He said, there was a guy out cleaning his windows in this street. And he said he fell off. And he managed to crawl around the corner to an adjacent street where the ambulance collected him. So I said, it was Joe Bloggs, and he was collected on such and such a street because he fell when he was cleaning his windows. And I got hundreds of letters saying, you're an idiot. He doesn't live in that street. He lives right next door to it. What we're paying you for. But true story, absolutely true story. And it tells you so much about local newspapers.
Yeah.
It's not just, it's hatches, matches, and dispatches, but it's also the beating heart of the community in many respects.
Yeah. It's actually, during the referendum in Largs, that was such an eye-opener for us in Largs, is that what happened to the BBC is actually what happened to the local press as well in this area, because people were experiencing something themselves and it was being reported on, but they were experiencing it, and so they were able to find the difference between what was being reported and what their actual lived experience was, and it was shocking. And I think that's what happened with the BBC. That's why the BBC distrust rocketed, because people were experiencing the event and then turning on the television and being told about an event that they didn't even recognise. And that actually happened with the local press here, because it was very conservative. And but I must say, the lessons that I learned that are built into the app do come from large, my experiences in largs,
Mm.
and part of the idea of the non-party political element of this, and it's always been that there are no political parties ever been allowed on the app, and no branches, just local autonomous groups. And
Yep.
that is because I went out campaigning with Tories, with a there are yes supporting Tories in largs, and I went out campaigning with them. And I'm not a Tory, but I tell you, it was the best experience of my life, political experience of my life, because it felt like independence really was covering the full spectrum of a country.
Yeah.
And that's what it has to do. And that's why politics can't come into this until we are at the point where we can vote, and our vote matters. That's democracy. And at this stage in my life and in Scotland, that doesn't exist. I want to get rid of nuclear weapons. It doesn't matter what I vote. It will never happen. I want to, I want independence for Scotland. Now is not the time, apparently, even at 56 out of 59. It doesn't matter. That is the definition of non-democracy. And it's why the population is drifting away from democracy, because it's been shown not to exist. It's been shown not to work.
I'm not sure I agree with that. I think the difficulty with your argument there is that if you preach the notion that all politics is rotten, then effectively you cut yourself off from any possibility of bringing about a major change, sadly.
I don't.
Because, well, for the simple reason that eventually at some stage you have to engage with the political process.
Yeah. Oh,
It's inevitable.
I've engaged with the political process, all my life, but I haven't joined a political party. I've campaigned for political parties, but I've never joined one for
Yeah.
that reason. I'm not railing against democracy. I'm railing against Scotland's democratic deficit. The only time that I've ever voted for something is when I voted for independence. Every other time, I'm voting against the worst, the best case. I'm voting against. I'm trying to stop something happening. I'm trying to stop the Tories. I'm trying to stop Labour. I'm trying to, that's the dilemma at the moment. I think
The thing though, Jason, the experience you're having is not unique.
no, it's not.
It's not, and people need to just once in a while open a history book, and you'll see that this is a repetition of what happened in Ireland, what happened in India, what happened in various parts of Africa. I could go on and go on and go on.
Yeah.
If you're operating a colonial structure, then these are exactly the patterns that occur. They've occurred for over 300 years now. In fact, they probably occurred in Roman times, if I could find the data. And it's always about trying to persuade the local colonized group to accept the rule from elsewhere.
Yeah.
That's not to say there's anything terrible about Westminster per se. It's just simply to say that if you're trying to run something from another place, invariably you never make a success of it.
Yeah.
For the simple reason that the people who live in a place tend to know how to run things better than somebody who doesn't live there. It's just a commonplace. It's nothing.
I mean, I completely agree. I completely agree with what you're saying. I mean, with Ireland, with all these past precedents, the thing that we have to take responsibility for is to not allow it to come up with a new solution that does not allow it to turn out like it turned out in Ireland, in India, in Africa. Violence. It's not.
It doesn't have to be. The violence in India was different to the violence elsewhere. The violence in India was done by the colonial state on the colonized. That was where the violence came. The issues that occurred on the point of separation were induced by the incompetence of the British administration. That's what produced a lot of the violence. It was encouraged for 100 years prior to that.
Yeah.
But the reality is that violence is not inevitable. What the violence tends to occur when the people's expression of a point of view is denied them.
Yeah.
And the reason for democracy, in my humble opinion, is to make sure that doesn't happen. And when people in Westminster say now is not the time, that the difficulty, the challenge they have there is that they have to say when the time will be, because if they don't, effectively they're undermining the democratic process.
Yeah, in
And
Scotland.
if you undermine it sufficiently, you leave people with very few alternatives. So that's that somebody in Westminster really needs to open a history book. They need to understand that you cannot keep repeating this mantra. Now, in fairness, they don't mean it. I don't suspect for a minute there's anybody sitting at Westminster who doesn't believe intrinsically that all of this is going to come back and bite them in the ass. Because the reality is that come the next Holyrood elections, all the independence parties, I think, will do exceptionally well. Because by that time, we'll have experienced 2 years of Labour failure in government. Now, this will be a chastening experience for many people who specifically voted Labour to get rid of the Tories because they believed intrinsically that the Tories and corruption and maladministration were all part of the same process. What they'll discover over the next 2 years is that the maladministration part of it is not different. Maladministration is there because the people who run the state don't understand it. And therefore, inevitably, it's a bit like running a business. Mm-hmm. You say to me, John, I don't like going to your hamburger joint because the chicken tastes awful. And I say, no, but hold on a second. People elsewhere like the chicken. So you're just going to have to buy it.
Yeah.
Well, you'll eventually walk out. You'll never go in my shop again. And that's maladministration. That's not caused by the fact that the people who worked in the shop didn't try to do a good deal just because I ran the thing badly. And if it's built into the system, then failure is inevitable. And then that's why primarily I asked you the question earlier about the vision that you have once you've put together this extraordinary, and I give you every credit for this, Jason, and you and your colleagues. Once you've put this group of people together and enthused them and given them ability to relate, somebody somewhere is going to ask the question, okay, I've now got the buzz back I had in 2014. How do I express this? Mm-hmm. Where do I go?
Yeah.
What do I do now?
I think
I want to make it happen.
Well, I don't want to sound like I'm avoiding the question, but I can answer it in this way: is that we also have people in our group that do this that have these discussions, and they are party political, and the tenor of the discussions are not as you speak about them, where it's inevitable that we're going to have a change, and people will get sick of Labour, and the feeling that they have at the moment is that it might not change. And what happens, God forbid, if something similar happens in 2 years' time? 2 years is not a long time, and maybe the population will want to punish the SNP. Maybe they'll want to do that, and it means that Holyrood could no longer be a pro-Indy institution for that period. Now, what is going to happen to the pro-Indy vote? That could happen with 50% of the population still wanting independence. 53% of the population could still want independence, yet they're so scunnered with the SNP that they decide to whatever happens. What I'm saying. And so where can that pro-independence feeling, where can it go to rest? Where can it go to still be visible, to not be gaslit, to work together, ready for the next cycle, the next political cycle? But if it doesn't happen, if there isn't a place for it to go, in the way that when we lost the referendum, the SNP was the place that people were able to go. But if there isn't a place, if the SNP are not the place to go, and there isn't another political party yet in the place for that, where can that go? And so what we are proposing is this count and a mass membership where those people can decamp and go somewhere meaningful and non-party political, so it can include Labour voters who have won, or Labour. If Labour take over Holyrood, it will be running Holyrood as an anti-independence organisation. An anti-independent.
I must be honest. I think the chances of Labour Party running Holyrood in 2 years' time, after 2 years of colossal failure by the Labour Party in Westminster, is just a pipe dream for Labour. I can't see that happening.
I think so. I hope
and
so.
And the other thing too is that even if that were to happen, that could be the worst possible thing ever, because then you'd have all the independent supporters on the sidelines saying, "I told you so. I told you so. I told you so." I'm not sure Labour are ever going to recover from being in power at Westminster.
Oh, I hope they don't. I'm not. I mean, what we're talking about here is a safety net. We're talking about, and not just a safety net, but also Scotland is trapped in a UK political system. Any politics that happens in Scotland, any party politics that happens in Scotland, are the politics of the UK. Mm-hmm. Whether it's Holyrood or whether it's Westminster, and it's political cycles and it's political payments, and it's these are what is party politics in Scotland, and the Yes movement because we're tied to party politics. Every cycle cuts us up and splits us up into different factions. And it hides the majority vote for independence, and it divides us. It divides us, and every time that there's an electoral cycle, and in Scotland there's twice as many as there are in England. We have a Holyrood cycle, and then we have a Westminster cycle, and then we have our local election cycles. So what we're proposing is to remove the Yes support and have a place for it to be, and a place for it not to be active, but a place for it to be visible and consistent and constant, and not just another poll that goes up or down, but a living network that can be used and contacted.
How would it be visible? Explain to me how it would be visible.
Well, if you have 500,000 people who are pro-Indy on the Indy app who are networked, and say 1 or 2% of them are members of groups, that's as many people as were members of groups during the referendum. Now, that there has got an ability to speak. It has an ability to push its agenda. It will have politicians coming to it. People. It's not just. During the referendum, the grassroots Yes movement signed up 1 million people in a petition. 1 million people signed a petition saying that they wanted independence, and that took a year to do, 2 years to do, from 2012 to 2014, and we did it. But that petition is in a drawer somewhere. What if we achieved that same goal and got 1 million people to sign their petition and sign up to the Indy app and do their declaration for independence? That's live. Each one of those people is private messageable. You can send a private message to them. Each one of those people, we know where their postcode is and what town they're in, and where the Yes support is and where it's not, and where it's powerful and where it's not. And we can, it becomes a living entity.
Listening to you, I'm fascinated. I'll tell you why, Jason. I was watching a program recently about people buying passports. Apparently, if you've got a British passport, you don't have to be stuck with that. There's some nice people in Costa Rica, in some of the Caribbean islands, in some of the Pacific kingdoms, who will happily take your money and provide you with a passport. Many of these passports operate across the EU. Right. Which, if you don't have an Irish passport and you live in Scotland, is a huge benefit.
I think Malta.
You don't have to stand in line when you're traveling to any of the European countries. Yeah. You just join the line for EU citizens, because effectively you're recognised as an EU citizen, even though you have a passport for some Caribbean island like St. Kitts and Nevis.
Yeah.
And apparently these countries, these islands, these little islands, are setting up IT countries. In other words, they're doing broadly what you've described, except they've taken it to the next level, which is to say there are benefits to signing up, apart from the psychological
Yeah.
advantage of knowing you're part of a large and growing community. There are also benefits, and one of these is that if you sign up for St. Kitts and Nevis, I hope they'll excuse me if I've misread their documentation, you not only pay some money and get a passport, which you can use across the world, but at the same time, as a citizen, you're entitled to certain other benefits. And it strikes me that if your Indy App had the flexibility you described earlier, then there are possibilities for it to expand to other dimensions, as it were, that might incorporate the structure of a country almost.
Yeah. Well,
is that too high flown?
Well, it's definitely a way ahead in the future. But I tell you something that is similar to what you've just spoken of. We've talked about it before, and it's hugely possible. Is that when I watch YouTube and I see YouTube, I like YouTube car shows, and we've got a guy who does a car show, and that man has got more power himself than the Yes Movement has at the moment, because that guy can put a code on his show and let every person who likes his show gets 10% off some oil product or some and he's achieved that because he's got this massive audience and he's got connection to this massive audience, and therefore they will approach him and say, we'll give you 10% off our product if you put it out there to your clients. And he's gaining that 10% for his clients. Now, the app, if we had 500,000 Yes supporters on the app, then again, we could start to do that with product.
You could monetize.
Not monetize, but for Yes Gear, for people who produce flags, for people who produce, equipment and we can get that brought down because we've got access to a large market, large possibilities of large sales. So that's without policies or any of that stuff. That's just showing your support and being an active member, not an inactive member. Just that you've got your number, your proven account, and therefore you're letting the leadership leverage you in order to achieve more with less. And that's something that comes. It's like an ice cream headache. That's a lot of things to think about. That's a problem. We should be taking advantage of that. But that can only be taken advantage of once we start getting that count up. I mean, another aspect of this is, do you remember when the no vote happened and we had all these thousands of people joining the SNP, and it was on the news every 2 days, 3 days, the SNP's gone up 30,000, it's gone up 20,000. This fillip that gave to everybody, and the press that gave, and also the encouragement it gave to other people to join the SNP, to do this thing and to make your point. Now that there is an incredibly powerful driver once you start getting momentum for joining, and that's the aim that we've got. Now, if it takes a year, fantastic. But if it takes 10 years, it takes 10 years. But we have to somehow manage to create this mass membership. Independent of party politics. If it's a message, I keep saying it, but that's the key to this, and not for us as grassrooters, not to get too involved in in the hopes of party politics working out this way or working out that way. We can't depend on it, so we have to start creating what we know we can create, and just get on with that, and let the party politics stuff fall where it does.
It does seem to me that what you're doing is very powerful and has the potential to be even more powerful. And one of the reasons I say that is because people are increasingly turned off by the media. I think it's well nigh impossible to run any media outlet nowadays and expect to get any appreciation for it. And also, I think too, that as mainstream media falls into disrepair, I'm trying to be as kind as possible.
Yeah.
And the BBC deciding to fire 500 people this week is an indication there of what happens when you have poor management of an organisation. You end up firing the people who are doing the hard, heavy lifting, so the bosses can continue.
Yeah.
But that's not a solution. That's a temporary fix. It doesn't let you get anywhere. But it's indicative that the mainstream media is failing, and I suspect that failure will intensify. But what that does is open up opportunities elsewhere. So it'd be nice to think that amongst your many groups, there might be a group, or maybe somebody should start this if they haven't already done so, which is to maybe bring together all the different media strands, a bit like the show tonight and other things.
Absolutely.
So that people have a choice.
Yeah,
definitely. For the first time in a long time, they don't have to watch BBC or STV or whatever. And then eventually what happens is that advertisers will then stop using them.
Yeah.
Not the BBC, of course. But license payers increasingly will not pay anymore.
And it's about collecting our own audience.
Yes.
That's what it is about doing. It's about collecting our own audience and our own networks to discuss the things that we want to discuss and point people in the direction of the places where they can discuss it.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, this is just quickly before we have to go, is that one of the things that we've been talking about in our meetings is how we're going to take this to the next stage.
Yes.
So what our proposal is that we're talking about this. We're going to be finding out if people would like to do this, but we are talking about holding an event for group members, ex-group members, and people, just supporters who would like to get involved in a national campaign for finding, registering, and networking the 53% of Yes supporters out there who are currently being divided by party politics in the UK, and make that independent support visible.
Okay, great.
So
that sounds a great idea. That's a good point to end on. I really appreciate that. Thanks very much, Jason. Well, that's it, folks.
Thank you so much for having me.
Pleasure. Stay on the line and we'll have a quick chat after we've gone offline.
Will do.
A big thanks to Jason and a big thanks to all of you for watching tonight. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. I've learned a lot tonight. And it strikes me as what's interesting is how when people are creative and feel strongly about something, they can achieve so much, vastly better than some people are simply hacks and are being forced to do something they don't quite believe in. If you believe in something, you will always find a way of doing it, as Jason has demonstrated tonight. Well, we have to close, as I say, sadly, because our hour is up. I just want to say two things, really. Look out for our show next week. And by the way, I want to issue a general invitation to every single MP who lost their seat at the last election. If you'd like to come on the show and explain to us what happened, how you feel, what your future looks like, then please, this is the place to come, because we'd all very much like to know, and if you're willing to share, we really would appreciate that. So get in touch, please. My email address is on the screen. If you can't find it, my direct email address is john@cleish.com. That's CLEISH.com. Don't hesitate. Drop me a note. Say, I'd like to come on the show and talk about how I feel now. You'd be most welcome. So there we are. Our time is up. And please think about the crowdfunder. The independent Indie Live doesn't have 300 million to spend each year as the BBC Scotland does. But I would suggest to you it doesn't probably do just as good a job, if not better. So it's only there with your support. Please provide it. Thank you. Good night all, and take care.
Good night. Thanks again.
Great pleasure.